The major relationship in the book is between Jacob and Athos. Athos has literally taken Jacob out of the earth where he has been hiding in the mud from the Germans, and he plucks him out and smuggles him over into Greece. This is a story of people who are exiles, and they're going to continue to be exiles for their entire lives. But in that experience of being in exile, they're constantly trying to find ways to learn from each other and to gain some insight into each other's histories and cultures and whatever knowledge each one of them possesses. So Athos teaches Jacob a love for poetry, a love of science, a love of history, a love of geology everywhere they go.
In this passage, we explore the nature of Jacob's relationship with his missing sister, Bella. Jacob doesn't know what's become of Bella, and this haunts him. Athos didn't understand, as I hesitated in the doorway, that I was letting Bella enter ahead of me, making sure she was not left behind. I paused when I ate, singing a silent incantation. A bite for me, a bite for you, an extra bite for Bella. Jacob, you're such a slow eater. You have the manners of an aristocrat. Awake at night, I'd hear her breathing or singing next to me in the dark, half comforted, half terrified that my ear was pressed against the thin wall between the living and the dead, that the vibrating membrane between them was so fragile. I felt her presence everywhere, in daylight, in rooms I knew weren't empty. I felt her touch on my back, my shoulders, my hair. I turned around to see if she was there, to see if she was looking, to see if she was standing guard. Though, if anything were to happen to me, she wouldn't be able to prevent it. Watching with curiosity and sympathy from her side of the gossamer wall.
This book is really examining memory and how we use it and how it can help us to heal or to understand the past and the future, and also how memory can be incredibly painful and we sometimes need to be free of it. This book is steeped with characters who are trying to piece together memories, piece together history, get away from painful memories. And in fact, it's filled with ghosts too. Characters who come into their lives that they remember. The main character, Jacob Beer, he's desperate to know what happened to his sister Bella. And at one point he says that he understands that when he remembers her, she feels as much pain in being remembered as he does when he attempts to remember her.
A great book for me is one whose landscapes I get lost in, whether they're physical descriptions of places or the interior landscapes of the characters. And beyond that, when a writer has a genuine compassion and understanding of the depths of the human soul and can illuminate what makes us long and what makes us love and the mysteries of loss and attachment. When a writer can shed new light on that, that's what I love to read about.
Reading Fugitive pieces, one really does get a sense of Michaels as a poet. She is, she lists and seems to be very much in love with the language of things, of geography, of places, of exploring, and she rounds out a character by giving us a sense of what that character is passionate about.
Athos is offered a job teaching at the University of Toronto, and he and Jacob relocate from Zakynthos to Toronto. One of the delights of reading a book by an author who describes a city that you know well, in this case Toronto, where I live, is that through the superhuman powers of observation and description that a wonderful author like Anne Michaels has. You rediscover the place where you live through new eyes. With a word, she can slice through your preconception of the geography of where you live and show you layers of meaning and history that you would never have imagined. With a few words, an incantation in Greek or English, and the sweep of his hand, Athos sliced a hill in half, drilled under the sidewalk, cleared a forest. He showed me Toronto cross-section. He ripped open cliffs like fresh bread, revealing the ragged geological past. Athos stopped in the middle of busy city streets and pointed out fossils in the limestone ledges of the Park Plaza Hotel or in the walls of a hydro substation. Ah, limestone, accumulating one precious foot every 25,000 years. Instantly, the streets were flooded by a subtropical salt sea. I imagined front lawns crammed with treasure, crinoids, lampshelves, trilobites. Like diving birds, Athos and I plunged 150 million years into the dark, deciduous silence of the ravines. Behind the billboard next to Tamblin's drugstore, we dipped down into the humid amphitheater of a Mesozoic swamp, where a mass of fronds and ferns, tall as houses, waved in a spore-dense haze. Beneath a parking lot, behind a school, from racket, fumes, and traffic, we dove into the city's sunken rooms of green sunlight. Then, like andarts, resurfaced half a city away, from under the bridge near Stan's Variety, or from behind the Honeydew restaurant. Athos showed me samples of the distinctive mottled Zumbro stone in the train station, explaining how it differed from the Tobermory or Kingston or Credit Valley stone. He pointed out Toronto's only example of lustrous black labradorite from Nain, flashing blue in the sunlight on Eglinton Avenue. One of our earliest excursions was a walk to Grenadier Pond to see where Silas Wright had made his first ice experiments. Then we went to find Silas Wright's old house on Crescent Drive. I'd heard the story many times. It was Wright who first sighted Scott's tent, buried by the fatal blizzard within a few inches of its tip. Wright pointed with his ski pole into the immaculate distance and uttered the famous words, "It is the tent." It gave me great satisfaction to stand with Athos on the street one windy November morning and announce in impeccable Canadian English, "It is the house."
Jacob becomes older, he teaches Athos how to live, how to move on from his own terrible experiences and the loss of an earlier wife, and to try and embrace the world again. He thinks that he's saved Jacob, but really Jacob has also saved Athos. And it's that wonderful relationship of when two people come together who don't have a blood relation, who don't have a shared ancestry, who don't have even a shared history, but find a way to be together and in fact become each other's only lifeline, become each other's family, is really quite extraordinary. And it's one of the most beautiful relationships, not only in this book, but in all of Canadian literature.
As the years go by in Toronto, Athos and Jacob are really quite exclusive to each other. They are the mainstay of each other's lives. But as Jacob becomes a man, Athos is aging. "Athos, how big is the actual heart?" I once asked him when I was still a child. He replied, "Imagine the size and heaviness of a handful of earth." On his last night, Athos had come home from giving a lecture on the conservation of Egyptian wood. It was about 10:30. He usually reported some observation of the evening, or even recounted the main details of his talk. But since I'd typed it for him earlier that day, the latter was unnecessary, and he was tired. I heated some wine for him and then went to bed. In the morning, I found him at his desk. He looked, as he often did, asleep in the middle of work. I embraced him with all my strength, again and again. that he would not come back. It is impossible to reach the emptiness in each cell. His death was quiet. Rain on the sea.
How do we honor the dead? How do we make up for the fact that we're alive and they're dead? The character of Bella is so important in this book because she really is where we look for answers to this question. Jacob Beer, her brother, has survived World War II, and Bella has not. And he's constantly, throughout the book, having imaginary dialogues with her, or she's intruding on his life in some way, or he's dreaming about her. And, you know, the potential of this wonderful young woman, and it's just been cut off right at the core. She has no future. I think that what Jacob tries to figure out is, how do you give the dead a future? And in fact, we can give the dead a future if we learn how to listen to them and to recognize them in our own lives.
I know only fragments of what Athos's death contained. No less than all the elements and their powers, 10,000 names for things, the humility of lichen, the instincts of migration, stars, magnetism, angles of light, the energy of time that alters mass, the element that reminded him most of his country, salt, olives, cheese, vine leaves, sea foam, sweat. 50 years of intimacy with Costas and Daphne, his memory of their bodies at 20, his own body as a child at 15, at 25 and 50. The selves that remain as we age, just as words remain on the page, though darkness erases them. Two wars, which are both the rotten part of the fruit that can't be cut away, and the fruit. There's nothing a man will not do to another, and nothing a man will not do for another. But who was the woman who first unbuttoned for him the two birds of her breasts in the night garden? Did he remember Helen's hands holding his, or were they in his hair, or were her arms outstretched when his head rested on her thighs? Did they imagine children? What words did he regret? Who was the first woman whose hair he washed? What song could have been his own voice singing of love when he first heard it? When a man dies, his secrets bond like crystals, like frost on a window. His last breath obscures the glass. I sat at Athos's desk, in a small flat, in a strange city, in a country I did not yet love. It's a book that deals with the subject matter of Holocaust really in a way without blame. It's really more an exploration of the mysteries of humanity, how humanity can sink to such utter depths, and yet how we can also redeem each other with simple acts of love and kindness.